The car arrived on a Tuesday, a sleek black sedan, parked in my usual spot, with a giant red bow on the hood. My boss, Richard Vance, stood beside it, beaming like a proud father. "Congratulations, Maya," he said, handing me the keys. "You've earned this. A company car, fully paid for, yours to use anytime, work or personal. Consider it a reward for your loyalty." I was stunned, overwhelmed, grateful. I hugged him, called my husband, posted a photo on social media. I had no idea that the car wasn't a gift. It was a trap, and the tracker hidden inside would soon reveal secrets I never imagined. Let me rewind. My name is Maya. I'm 34, a senior account executive at a marketing firm called Vance and Company. I'd been there for 8 years, climbing the ladder from intern to leadership. Richard Vance, the owner, was a charismatic figure, the kind of boss who remembered your birthday, asked about your kids, made you feel like family. I'd always admired him, trusted him, believed in his vision. The company car was a big deal. Not just anyone got one. It was a symbol of status, of trust, of belonging to the inner circle. When Richard handed me those keys, I felt like I'd finally arrived. The first few months were bliss. I drove the car everywhere, work, errands, weekend trips with my family. It was comfortable, reliable, and free. I didn't think twice about the GPS system built into the dashboard. Most new cars have them, right? For navigation, for safety, for convenience. Then one day, Richard called me into his office. He closed the door, something he rarely did, and sat across from me with a serious expression. "Maya, I need to ask you something personal." I felt a flicker of unease. "Of course. What's up?" "Last Tuesday, you left work at 3 p.m. Can you tell me where you went?" I thought back. I had a doctor's appointment. I told Sarah I was leaving early.
Right.
And after the doctor's appointment, you went to a coffee shop. Spent about an hour there. Then you went home. I nodded, confused.
Yes.
"Is there a problem?" Richard leaned back, his expression unreadable. "No problem. Just making sure everything's above board. We have a strict policy about using company time for personal errands." I felt a flush of anger. It was a doctor's appointment. I had a note. I followed protocol. "Of course. Like I said, just checking." I left his office, unsettled. How did he know about the coffee shop? How did he know I'd gone home? I hadn't told anyone those details. Over the next few weeks, Richard's questions became more frequent, more specific. He'd ask about my lunch breaks, my evening errands, my weekend activities. Always casual, always framed as concern, but always unnervingly accurate. "How was your hike on Saturday?" "The one in the state park." "Did you get your car serviced?" "I noticed you were at the dealership last Thursday." "That Thai place you went to last night, is it good?" "I've been meaning to try it." I started to feel watched, paranoid, but I told myself I was imagining things. Richard was just being friendly, right? He was just interested in his employees' lives. Then I found the tracker. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was cleaning out the car, getting ready for a road trip with my family. I pulled down the sun visor to wipe it, and something fell into my lap. A small device, about the size of a matchbox, with a blinking green light. I stared at it, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. I picked it up. It had a brand name on it. TrackMate GPS. I Googled it on my phone. Real-time location tracking, geofencing alerts, historical route data. Designed for fleet management, but also sold to anyone who wanted to keep tabs on a vehicle. Someone had been tracking my every move. Every trip to the grocery store, every visit to my mother's house, every time I picked up my kids from school. All recorded, all monitored, all reported to someone. I felt sick. Who would do this? Richard? The company? Had they been watching me for months? I didn't confront anyone. Not yet. I needed to know more. I needed proof. I took the tracker to a friend who worked in cybersecurity. He examined it, confirmed it was active, and helped me access the data it was transmitting. The tracker was sending real-time location information to a server. And that server was registered to Vance & Co., my boss, the man who'd given me the car as a gift. The man who'd asked me about my weekend hikes and my Thai food dinners. He'd been tracking me for months, maybe longer. The anger came then, cold, clear, and focused. I wasn't going to confront him. I wasn't going to quit. I was going to gather evidence, document everything, and make sure he paid for what he'd done. I started keeping a journal. Every question Richard asked, every time he mentioned something he shouldn't know, I wrote it down. I took screenshots of the tracking data, documented the dates and times. I even recorded a few conversations, carefully, legally, in a one-party consent state. The evidence grew. Weeks turned into months. I learned that Richard had been tracking me since the day I got the car. He knew my routines, my habits, my private life. He knew when I visited my therapist, when I had lunch with friends, when I went to the gym. He knew everything. And then I found something worse. Something that made my blood run cold. The tracker wasn't just monitoring my location. It was also recording audio. Short snippets, captured whenever the car was parked and the engine was off. Conversations I'd had with my husband, my children, my friends. Private moments captured and transmitted to Richard's server. I had all the evidence I needed. Now I just needed to decide what to do with it. I called a lawyer the next morning. A woman named Priya, who specialized in privacy law and workplace surveillance. She listened to my story without interrupting, then asked me to send her everything, the tracker, the data logs, the recordings, the journal. "This is serious," she said when she called back. "Really serious. If what you're telling me is true, your boss has violated multiple federal and state laws. Wiretapping, stalking, invasion of privacy. The list goes on." I felt a surge of validation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was a victim of a crime. Priya explained the legal landscape. First, there's the Federal Wiretap Act. If he was recording audio without consent, that's a felony. Then there's state privacy laws. Depending on where you live, surreptitious tracking can be considered stalking or harassment. And then there's the civil side. You can sue for damages, emotional distress, invasion of privacy. This could be huge. Can I prove it was him? We can try. The tracker is registered to his company. The server logs show who accessed the data. If we can link those access logs to him personally, we have a case. Over the next few weeks, Priya and her team built our case. They subpoenaed the tracking company's records, revealing that Richard had personally logged into the system dozens of times, often late at night, sometimes multiple times a day. They analyzed the audio recordings, matching voices and timestamps to prove they were captured without consent. They even found evidence that Richard had shared some of the location data with other executives, discussing my habits and routines in company meetings. It was a comprehensive invasion of privacy, orchestrated by the man I'd trusted most. The question was, what did we do with it? Priya laid out the options. We can go to the police, file criminal charges. He could face prison time. Or we can file a civil lawsuit, seek damages, publicly expose what he did. Or we can confront him privately, try to negotiate a settlement. Each option has risks and rewards. I thought about Richard, about the years of trust, the mentorship, the fatherly concern that was really surveillance, about the recordings of my private conversations, my children's voices, my husband's jokes, about the violation of everything I thought was safe. I want him to face consequences, I said. Public consequences. I want everyone to know what he did. Priya nodded slowly. Then we file a lawsuit. And we do it in a way that gets maximum attention. We filed in federal court on a Monday. The complaint was 47 pages long, detailing every violation, every piece of evidence, every moment of betrayal. We also filed a motion for a temporary restraining order, preventing Richard from accessing any more data or destroying evidence. The news broke within hours. Local TV stations, national news outlets, tech blogs. Everyone wanted the story. Executive accused of tracking employee with GPS-equipped company car. Surveillance scandal rocks marketing firm. Woman discovers boss was recording her private conversations. Richard's PR team went into overdrive, issuing denials, attacking my credibility, painting me as a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. But the evidence was public now. The tracker, The logs, the recordings, all of it was out there, and the court of public opinion was already rendering its verdict. The week after we filed, I got a call from Richard. His voice was calm, controlled, but I could hear the anger beneath it. "Maya, we need to talk. This doesn't have to be a war." "Richard, you tracked me for months. You recorded my private conversations. You violated every boundary of trust and privacy. This is already a war. I can make this go away. A settlement. Generous terms. You walk away rich and we never speak of this again." I looked at Priya, who was listening on speaker. She shook her head.
No, Richard.
"I'm not interested in your money. I'm interested in justice." I hung up. The war had just begun. Richard didn't try to settle. Instead, he launched a full-scale counterattack. His lawyers filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that the tracker was standard company equipment and that I'd consented to monitoring by accepting the car. They claimed the audio recordings were a technical glitch and that any privacy violations were inadvertent. They even filed a countersuit, accusing me of theft of company property for removing the tracker and sharing it with my lawyer. It was absurd, offensive, and legally baseless. But it was also a sign of how far he was willing to go to protect himself. Priya was unfazed. "This is what guilty people do," she said. "They throw everything at the wall, hoping something sticks. We just have to stay calm and let the evidence speak." The evidence was overwhelming. The tracking company's logs showed Richard accessing the system multiple times a day, often late at night. The audio files were timestamped and matched to moments when the car was parked and I was having private conversations. The technical glitch argument fell apart when our expert testified that the recording function had been deliberately enabled. It wasn't a default setting, but an active choice. But Richard had one more card to play. A card I hadn't anticipated. His lawyers subpoenaed my personal devices, my phone, my laptop, my tablet. They wanted to search for evidence that I'd stolen company secrets, that I'd been planning to leave the firm, that I'd somehow provoked his surveillance. It was a fishing expedition, designed to invade my privacy the same way Richard had. Priya fought the subpoena, but the judge allowed a limited search by an independent expert. The expert found nothing because there was nothing to find. I hadn't stolen secrets. I hadn't planned to leave. I'd just been an employee doing my job, trusting my boss. The countersuit was dismissed. Richard's motion to throw out our case was denied. We were heading to trial. The discovery process was brutal. Richard's lawyers deposed everyone I knew, my husband, my friends, my colleagues. They asked invasive questions about my marriage, my mental health, my work performance. They tried to paint me as unstable, untrustworthy, bitter. It was exhausting and humiliating. But through it all, I held on to one thing, the truth. I knew what Richard had done. I had the proof. And I was determined to see it through. The trial date was set for 6 months out. In the meantime, Richard's behavior grew, increasingly erratic. He fired several employees who'd testified in depositions. He sold his stake in the company. He stopped coming to the office altogether. The empire he'd built was crumbling. And then, 3 weeks before trial, we got a call from Richard's lawyer. He wanted to settle. Priya and I met to discuss the offer. It was substantial, enough to cover my legal fees, compensate me for emotional distress, and then some. But it came with a catch, a non-disclosure agreement. I'd have to stay silent about everything. Never talk about the case, never warn other employees, never tell my story. I thought about the other women at Vance & Co. The ones who might be getting tracked right now without knowing it. The ones who trusted Richard the way I had. The ones who deserved to know the truth. "What do you think?" I asked Priya. "It's a good offer. Financially, it makes sense. But you have to decide what matters more, the money or the principle." I sat with that question for a long time. I took 48 hours to decide. I barely slept, barely ate, just paced my apartment, running through every possible outcome in my head. The settlement offer was $750,000. Enough to change my life, to secure my children's future, to walk away from this nightmare forever. But it came with silence. I'd have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, never speak about what Richard did, never warn anyone else. I thought about the other women at the company. The ones who might be getting tracked right now. The ones who trusted Richard the way I had. Could I live with myself if I stayed silent? I called my husband first. He'd been my rock through all of this, holding down the fort while I fought my battles. He listened without interrupting, then asked one question. What does your gut tell you? My gut is confused. The money would make life so much easier. Life easier isn't the same as life better. You have to live with yourself after this. Which decision lets you do that? I called Priya next. She was professional as always, but I could hear the weight in her voice. Maya, I'll support whatever you decide. But I want you to understand what you're giving up if you take the settlement. Not just the money, the chance to set a precedent. To show other companies that surveillance has consequences. To protect other employees from the same invasion. You think I should go to trial? I think you have a strong case. I think the evidence is overwhelming. I think a jury would likely rule in your favor. But trials are unpredictable. And even if we win, Richard could appeal, drag this out for years. The settlement is certain. The trial is a gamble. I hung up and sat in silence, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Then I thought about the recordings. The snippets of my private life, captured without consent. My children's voices, my husband's jokes, my own vulnerable moments. I thought about Richard, listening to them, maybe sharing them, using them to feel powerful. I thought about the other women, the ones who might be next. I called Priya back. We're going to trial. The decision was met with mixed reactions. Some people called me brave. Others called me foolish. The trial lasted 4 weeks. 28 days of testimony, evidence, and legal maneuvering. Sarah took the stand and described her own experience. The car, the questions, the creeping sense that she was being watched. 3 other women followed, each with a similar story, each confirming that Richard's surveillance wasn't a one-time mistake, but a pattern of behavior stretching back years. Richard sat at the defense table, his face impassive, his lawyers objecting to every question, every piece of evidence. But the truth was unavoidable. The tracker, the recordings, the witnesses, all of it pointed to one conclusion. The jury deliberated for 3 days. I spent that time in a fog, unable to eat, unable to sleep, unable to think about anything except the 12 people in that room deciding Richard's fate. Priya tried to keep me calm, but nothing could penetrate the anxiety. On the 3rd day, the bailiff called. The jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom filled quickly, reporters, former colleagues, curious onlookers. Sarah and the other women sat in the gallery, holding hands, their faces tense. Richard sat at the defense table, his lawyers flanking him, his expression carefully neutral. The jury filed in. The foreman, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, handed a piece of paper to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Judge Morrison read it silently, then looked up. Will the plaintiff please rise? I stood, my legs trembling. On the charge of invasion of privacy, how does the jury find? The foreman unfolded the paper. We find the defendant liable. A murmur ran through the courtroom. I gripped the table to steady myself. On the charge of violation of the Federal Wiretap Act. Liable. On the charge of stalking under state law. Liable. On the charge of intentional infliction of emotional distress. Liable. 4 counts. Liable on all 4. The judge thanked the jury and dismissed them, then turned to the damages phase. Priya had prepared a detailed accounting of my losses, the emotional distress, the invasion of privacy, the impact on my career. Richard's lawyers argued that the damages should be minimal, that I'd suffered no real harm. The jury deliberated on damages for another day. When they returned, the foreman read the number. $2.5 million in compensatory damages and $5 million in punitive damages. $7.5 million total. The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed for the doors. Richard's lawyers sat in stunned silence. I collapsed into my chair, tears streaming down my face. Priya squeezed my arm. You did it. The aftermath was overwhelming. The story made headlines around the world. I was interviewed by major networks, featured in magazines, invited to speak at conferences about workplace privacy. Richard was fired from his own company, his reputation destroyed. The company itself was sold, its assets liquidated, its name erased from the industry. Sarah and the other women who'd testified received their own settlements, negotiated separately. We formed a support group, meeting monthly to share our stories, to heal together, to remind each other that we weren't alone. The $7.5 million changed my life, but not in the way I expected. I didn't buy a house or a car, or any of the things people assume you'd buy. Instead, I started a nonprofit, an organization dedicated to protecting employee privacy rights, educating workers about surveillance, and advocating for stronger laws. We've helped hundreds of people since, from warehouse workers to corporate executives, all of whom discovered they were being tracked without consent. The micro-niche here isn't just workplace surveillance or privacy law. It's about the fundamental right to exist without being watched. It's about the trust we place in employers and the betrayal when that trust is violated. It's about the courage to speak out, to fight back, to demand accountability from those who would use technology to control and intimidate. Have you ever felt like your privacy was being violated at work? Did you speak up, or did you stay silent? Share your stories in the comments below. Let's build a community of workers who understand that privacy isn't a perk, it's a right. And if this story of GPS trackers, secret recordings, and hard-won justice resonated with you, share it. Every share is a reminder that we have power if we're brave enough to use it. Thanks for listening.